This podcast is brought to you by Racing Thread, Formula One clothing for literally any occasion. Their clothing features subtle, evocative, embroidered designs of your favorite F1 moments. From Ricciardo's McHorsey entrance to Kevin's first pole. From Pierre and Yuki's bromance to Inspector Seb, the moments are endless. Whether you're out to dinner with friends, watching the race at home, or cheering in the grandstands, gone are the embarrassing sponsor logos. Instead, Racing Thread is F1 clothing you're comfortable wearing anywhere. Right now, Dirty Driving listeners can get 15% off Racing Thread's entire range of t-shirts, sweatshirts, polos, and bucket hats using the code Dirty Driving. Head over to racingthread.com to shop F1 racewear for anywhere. It's chaos. It's a different type of Sunday scary. It's your newest obsession. It's Dirty Driving, a Formula One podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode before the actual season kicks off. So, what are we talking about? We're talking about preseason testing because, my God, did it feel good to log into my F1 TV app. It was the first time I've done that in a couple months, and on my iPad at least, and I had to update the app and re-sign in and get situated with what I was clicking and where I was clicking, but I made it happen and I watched preseason testing and it was phenomenal. And I really thought about whether or not to do an episode on this just because it is preseason testing, so they're still trying to figure out what's going on with the vehicle, and there will still be improvements made before the actual race. So everything that I'm about to talk about, you have to take with a grain of salt because it's preseason testing, and things are going to change again before we even get started this Friday. Before we jump into what actually happened, I wanted to talk a little bit about what preseason testing is because it has changed over the years from this private event with the teams where they could test as much as they want to now a very highly regulated and streamed, because there's never enough F1 content, that allows equal time, 25 and a half hours to be exact, and the same conditions for everyone. So it's changed. I think watching preseason testing has gotten more popular. But if you did not have a chance to watch 25 and a half hours of preseason testing, then you're in the right place because I'm going to talk you through it in about 15 minutes. Preseason testing is essentially the only chance for a team to run their cars on track before the official start of the season. This year, we went from having Barcelona testing time and Bahrain testing time to just having testing time in Bahrain. So lots of things that they're testing for. They're testing every single thing on the car. There are sensors all over the car. We're going to talk about some words that you should know or need some clarity on if you've watched it already. We know that considerable changes are made to car designs over the winter break, and teams will build essentially a completely new car in that time. So they need to test the new parts while also making sure their cars are reliable and able to finish a race. It's also a chance for the drivers to begin to get familiar with the changes in the cars. The engineers will be collecting data and comparing it to what the wind tunnel and simulations have shown to see if they're on the right track. And the mechanics are really able to hone in their skills, their pit stop skills, with some practice. Testing has been happening for decades. Like I said, it used to be private. They could test as much as they want, and now it's completely regulated and, again, streamed for us to watch. Teams are only allowed to test one car at a time. To add to what I said about taking everything with a grain of salt, is these headline lap times matter very little in testing. Teams instead are focused on clocking up mileage to stress new parts and assess the reliability of the car. It's not really until the third and final day on Saturday where they'll choose to try their pure pace out. Another huge thing about taking everything with a grain of salt is, unlike in the season, we have no idea how much gas they have in the vehicles, which changes the weight of the car and the performance of the car. And we also have no idea what engine modes the cars are programmed to while they're testing. So it's very vague. And that's why I just want to be very clear that what we see in testing is not always what we see once the season starts. There are a couple terms that you need to know, whether you have already watched testing and you are maybe confused, or if you're going to go back and watch testing, or at least part of testing before the season starts. So the first is FlowViz paint, and it's a paint formed by mixing a fluorescent powder with a light oil. It's applied to the car and it sprays kind of everywhere, and it dries, and it allows them to analyze what kind of flow structures the car has. They're looking for separation where the flow's separating and isn't consistent. And if there aren't decent flow structures over the car, the aerodynamicists will then try to understand what's going on and hopefully try to rectify certain problems that they're seeing thanks to the FlowViz paint. The other one is aero rakes, which is this weird scaffolding-like structure that they attach to the cars that's covered in a million sensors that also measure the airflow off the car's body. So data is used to compare to the data from the wind tunnel and simulations. They are again looking for separation to create better flow structures over the car to reduce aerodynamic drag. Then we've got 3 vocab words that are focused on the type of laps they can be running. The first is an installation lap, which is a lap to check whether the throttle, brakes, hydraulics, and electronics, as well as the other crucial components, are actually working as they should. So if we hear like installation lap, they're just testing to make sure everything is in place and nothing's going to essentially break, but that doesn't keep things from breaking. The other one is glory runs. And that's when a midfield or back marker car manages to shoot up in the leaderboard with a fantastic lap. This is most often achieved on the last day with a low fuel load and on the softest compound of tires. Finally, there's sandbagging, which is literally the opposite of a glory run. It's when a team has their drivers deliberately lap slower than expected or slower than what the car's potential is. And this is done to hide the real pace of the car. There's controversy around sandbagging because some people say, it shouldn't happen, or, there's no way to monitor that or no way to know, but it happens all the time and it happens every year. And sometimes they admit to it and sometimes the teams don't admit to it. Looking to get the kiddos in your life interested in Formula One? This series includes the ABCs of Racing, which teaches concepts about racing with Red Racer as your guide. The 34-page book is full of gorgeous illustrations inspired by actual tracks and racing situations around the world. The series also includes the book All About Race Cars, a guide to Formula One race cars. Red Racer and Roxy the Engineer walk you through all the ins and outs of F1 in this 40-page book with beautiful illustrations teaching STEM facts about F1 cars. Red Racer Books is on a mission to give kids in the US and beyond a global perspective on sportsmanship, diversity, science, and technology. Right now, Dirty Driving listeners can get 20% off Red Racer Books' entire series using the code Dirty Driving. Head over to redracerbooks.com to buy the kiddos in your life, or the adults, their new favorite book. Let's get into what we saw in preseason testing. Unfortunately, Lance Stroll sat out of preseason testing due to an injury involving a cast, supposedly. They've been very hush-hush about what has happened to Lance Stroll. There were rumors that he broke both of his wrists. There was rumors about being in a cast. There were some photos that came out of him flying with his father to London, and I didn't see a cast in the photos, but again, they're being very vague about it. He was not able to participate, and he received this injury thanks to a cycling accident while he was training that happened in Spain. So Felipe Drogovic took his place and did a decent job, especially in an Aston Martin that blew us out of the water this year so far. Day 1, we got a red flag 10 minutes in due to an electrical issue for no other than Felipe Drogovic. Sainz was the fastest halfway through the morning session, but ultimately ended up second behind Verstappen, who was pacing 0.3 faster. Verstappen was the only driver to drive the entirety of day 1, and he led the second session, completing a total of 157 laps. Alonso took second, just 0.029 seconds behind Max, which was where Aston Martin started to shine, and we all started to look at Aston Martin. Ferrari were third and fourth, and one thing that I've got to mention is that very early on, the Ferrari nose was denting in when they were going at a certain pace, like a high pace. And there were some jokes made that that's where they are going to be storing their pasta sauce this year. But they did say that that's not supposed to happen and that they're working on fixing it and adding another part so that doesn't happen. In other Ferrari news, their new team principal, Vasseur, admitted that at one point he wanted Sainz to drive for Sauber. So he's saying praises for the driver duo that he has this year. He's previously worked with Charles Leclerc at Alpha, and now he gets his second dream driver in Carlos Sainz. Early signs, aka day 1, showed that Merck had essentially solved their porpoising issue that we saw last year. And then McLaren had a really poor start. Piastri had an issue with the wheelbarrow braking, and Lando only pulled 92 laps, which was the lowest of the day. That brings us to day 2. Session 1 had Sainz leading with a time of 0.4 faster than what Max had set on the first day. Of all people, Logan Sargent slotted into second with Alonso in third. The second session of the day had Zhao beat Max by 0.04 of a second, even when his session ended 10 minutes early due to his car not allowing him to enter first gear. Russell came to a stop as well with a hydraulics issue, and Sargent ended early due to a small electrical issue. Alonso once again was at the top of the charts in third at the end of the day, and on day 2, McLaren admitted to missing preseason targets, which we saw on day 1 and on day 2. It seems that Red Bull are leading the field with half a second advantage over the rest of the field. Ferrari ran through their preseason testing program without any hiccups, which was impressive, and Williams had pretty much their best preseason testing day in recent years, and the drivers are reporting that there's much more balance in this year's car compared to last year. Haas came through looking like they will be a dark horse this season and really show us what they can do. It seemed like the cars were pretty unbalanced for Merck, so there's a lot of work that is still needed. But Toto Wolff claims that they are still hiding some pace, so who knows what will happen come Friday, Saturday, and Sunday later this week. And then finally on day 3, session 1 had Leclerc set the fastest time of testing thus far. Merck took second place, 0.4 behind Ferrari, and Felipe had third best. So Aston Martin took third best in day 2 and day 3, and second best in day 1. Session 2 had Perez top the session with a time faster than last year's pole. Hamilton took P2 with a lot of signs of improvement, and Valtteri took P3 to end day 3. What did we actually learn from preseason testing? Red Bull and Ferrari will be the top leaders headed into Bahrain and could have the potential to really take this season by its horns and lead us for a while very early on into the season. Merck could be in trouble and challenged for third by Aston Martin. I don't know if Lance will be able to keep it together with Fernando to gain enough points in comparison to Lewis and George, but I definitely think early on in the season we are going to see Aston Martin and Merc competing. McLaren is in trouble. I don't even know what to say. They looked very poor out there, and they're either doing a fantastic job of hiding everything, or as rumors report, Lando punched a wall. So I don't think they're doing so hot, and I don't think it's on purpose. This may be karma for the way they handled the Daniel Ricciardo situation, but I'll leave that at that. And then Haas, Alfa Romeo, and Williams could all be the dark horses this season and show us something that we have never seen from these three teams. My ultimate loser of preseason testing is McLaren because they have the most work to do. And my winner is Aston Martin because they blew everyone away. Now, I'll say it one more time. We've got to remember that we've got to take this with a grain of salt because there's changes that are still going to be made and packages that are going to be dropped early on in the season that will update these cars and turn them into completely different cars by the time the season ends. That's your preseason testing run through. Hope you enjoyed it. There's a couple more episodes coming out before we get into the season, so keep an eye out for them, and thanks for listening. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Dirty Driving. Until next time, stay dirty.